Hi everyone, I'm Francois Bouillon. I'm a project designer for Flame. And in the last release, the extension 2016 extension 1, I worked in the Gmask Tracer.
Well, let's take a look.
All right.
See what's new. It's a whole new module.
It's an all new module. So if we start looking at the interface, you'll see it's very familiar for the people doing action. So it's basically what we've done is in the past we received like a lot of requests about adding to the Gmask node a lot of action feature like tracking, camera, and so on. It seems to be an easy thing to say. Well, it's on a module, bring it on the other. But in fact, it's more complicated than that. So what we've done in the 2016 extension 1 is take the core of action and build a tool that is dedicated to do matte creation, rotoscoping work.
It's a roto super tool.
A roto super tool with all the functionality that action has to offer. So the one that are familiar with action will quickly recognize the tool layout and the way it works. So you still have the schematic, the node bin, the object output, and analyzer if you do 3D tracking. In output, I mean, there's only the functionality that makes sense remains. So you can only create matte output, but obviously you can have as many as you want in batch. So you can do the multi-output workflow you do with action, but now to create matte. And the node bin is having less feature and keeping just only the one that makes sense for a matte output. A big difference that there is, and I think it's worth mentioning, is the in relationship to action is the fact that if you have a matte coming in, so if we look at it, for the F4 background, you have a choice. It's either you use the matte, you can also use a color like in action. But the reason why you might want to switch it back to black, for example, is because you have the option to bring in the matte as a surface. So you can then use a camera and do whatever you want. So you're not locked in as a
fixed 2D plane.
Yeah, exactly. If we go back to roto workflow, we've made a few adjustments in regards to what was possible, how action works actually. So now you can use a hotkey to create your Gmask automatically and then be in draw mode. So it's a little speed up in workflow in compared to what you had previously in action. So let's say I want to create another one. You just have to do the hotkey, which is Alt-N, and start drawing. We've done also different adjustment to the Gmask workflow. So as before, there's different ways of creating the axis for the Gmask. So you can have the axis positioned in the center of the screen if you do the draw to the. I'll start over and show the different options. So if you double click on the Gmask, the axis will be at the center of the Gmask. If you bring the node to the schematic and then start drawing, the axis will remains at the center of the screen. But if you drag the Gmask as you directly in the image, you can put the axis wherever you want and then draw the Gmask elsewhere. Now this is it's offer like a flexibility, but on the other hand, I mean it was something that people were requesting to be able to override after the fact. Depending if you made either a bad decision when start drawing or just don't realize that the axis was a wrong place. So we added a functionality called offset axis. So once you have drawn your Gmask, you can enable that, and then that allow you to move the axis and put it wherever you want without affecting the Gmask position. Then removing the option will allow you to move the Gmask with the axis as normally. If you want it to be centered on the shape, then there's an option to just do that automatically for you with the center button there.
And is that universal for the whole scene? In other words, the position of the offset axis, that axis position there is set for the whole scene, or not on a key frame by frame basis?
No, it's for the whole scene. So yeah, that's a very important point. So the axis itself should not have any keyframe, and the Gmask also, preferably the Gmask, should not have keyframe as well. So it's a limitation for now, but the feature of the Gmask Tracer basically, regroup the tracking functionality, like 3D tracker, the perspective grid, and whatever the feature you used to have in action. But we also added 3D shape, and I'll show you how interesting that can be for combining shapes. So if, for example, I want to do Boolean operators, in the old Gmask, you had to do play with the colors and offset of the shape. Now with 3D shape, what you can do is parent underneath the same 3D shape multiple Gmask, and since they are the 3D shape itself is able to quickly offer you options to combine either an union, intersection, or use the priority to create a shape. The good thing about the 3D shape is that it's a piece of geometry, so it has its own blending mode, and then it's handled as a single object. So you can do multiple 3D shape in a scene, combine them together, and you don't have to necessarily, for all the different Gmask handle bending modes.
Yeah, that's a 2D implementation of 3D shape, but of course, again, here in this new module, you have full 3D tracking, which is also obviously where the 3D shape becomes useful.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. For the drawing workflow, also, one nice addition we've done is improve the edit box that was already there. So in the past, like, the edit box was limited to the old shape. Now it's selection based. So if I select a bunch of points, let's say on the top here, and then press Control E, I enable the edit box and can then move those points using the edit box. So I can do translation directly on screen, can do the scaling, the rotation, as well as shearing. You can also use hotkey for nudging. So you can, with the Win key and the arrows, do a position up and down, left, right. You can also use the Win Alt for rotation, and you can do Win Control for scaling. Obviously, you can also use the numeric field, and also if you end up in the shape is always reset itself at the next selection. So if you end up in a box where it's difficult to edit, you can do undo the selection and reselect it, and then the box will be back to. So it's a nice little improvement for the usability of the Gmask. One thing we added to the Gmask is a tracer functionality. It's a kind of new take on the old tracer found in the Gmask, where the key was limited to the section of the gradient. Now if I create a Gmask, and that will just grab a portion here with the green screen on the background. I'll switch to the F8 view. The F8 view is also something that's interesting that was not there in the Gmask. It will allow you to see each shape individually. And now there's a second mode of the F8 view. So you have the first F8 view for tracking and seeing your shape with on the image. But the second time you hit the F8, then you'll have your matte. So for now it's white, but you'll see. So if I switch to the tracer mode, tracer tab, the first let's say task you have to do, and in this shot it doesn't move too much, so I mean I can go to pretty much any frame. But the first thing you need to look into is where you want to start your first key, and then press the add on the analysis. So that will give you a background and a foreground color patches, and you can position them whatever you want. They are not limited to the border of the shape. So if I switch to F8 again, then I'll see my matte live that is being created by moving the box around.
What's the keying algorithm on this?
Yeah, it's a good point. The keying algorithm is pretty similar to the 3D keyer. I said similar. I mean, it's a similar concept. It's far more easier, I found, to use with the widgets and maybe not as powerful because you don't have the 3D cube and the 3D functionality, but it's still using ellipsoid, 3D ellipsoid under the hood. But it's a new take on it because you can actually, in this case, create different analysis point at different time in the shape. So in the shot, so if, let's say, for example, the color information were changing dramatically in between a certain frame, let's say, even like for flickering, luminance type of problem, you can then go and then create many different analysis points, and then the algorithm will linearly interpolate in between the key result. For each analysis point, maybe I can just do an example, even if it's not necessary in this example. I can then create another analysis point with add, and then by default will bring me the same location for the picker box, but then I can put them, change them anywhere I want. I can also add new ones, so I have 2 background patches or like 3 foreground if I need to. And then this is going to be, if I hit previous, you'll see that this is my first setup of picker box, and that's my second analysis, and then it's a bit crazy what I've done, but you see the interpolation in between the two.
Right.
Also on top, for the rendering part of thing, you have softness on the background and foreground, and those are independent than the analysis points, so you can keyframe those independently. You can also easily invert the rendering of the key, and then also limit the gradient, the key to the gradient. So if I create a gradient here, and then enable that. It's worth mentioning that you won't see the result in this view because the F8 views are always showing you the whole key for the whole image based on what you selected. But if you switch to F4, then you'll see that the interior of the shape is completely white, while the gradient portion is only receiving the key. So it's a bit awkward what I've done, but let's say for an example more like that, where you know that the interior of the shape here, you don't want to have any black spot because it's opaque, and then concentrate the algorithm on the edge, then it's more interesting use case, and it will be closer actually to what the old tracer was doing, and only be on the gradient. Then there are also post-processing that you can use, which is also independent of the key analysis and be keyframe and independently. Yeah, and then I have an example where I actually did that same example with multiple spline, just to show you what like the different use case you can use to for the technology. So that the first one here, it's an open spline I created, so you don't even need to use a full Gmask. Just an open spline with a gradient will do. And then if you see, like in this example, I concentrated on that side of the air. Switch to the other one. I've done the top of her head, like that. Third one is the other side, and the fourth one I'll show you. And then the fourth one is actually the filler, like the inner part with a gradient, as I just showed, like gradient only rendering. So if I look at it, you see in the middle there was a bunch of things I didn't want, but you don't need to worry about it because in F4 you see that it's just fitting it in, and those 3 Gmask are then combined using blend modes. So it's one way of using it. You can obviously combine that with an input matte. So it's pretty flexible.
Well, so now what's interesting about this is the Gmask Tracer improvements is a new node, but many improvements in the Gmask itself actually apply in action as well.
Yes, exactly. Everything I've shown is also made its way in action, and this is a good thing of sharing the core, let's say, of the tool. The first thing, maybe I'll segue with the tracer. So one thing to keep in mind is that the tracer, I mean, can be used for rotoscoping, but it can also be used to as a to add more precision to a Gmask in action for, let's say, for example, in this case, do a Lightbox, for example. So what I've done here is there's a shape, and if we look at the F8 view of that Gmask, I've created like a key of the sky, and then by doing a Gmask link to the light and the Lightbox, I don't even need to track or anything, and then you see that the color I've changed on the sky is not affecting the mountain because it's it's part of the Gmask, and then I have my feathering here. So this is one way you can use it, or even do live for your compositing live in the action. You can use the tracer to do that. One thing to keep in mind is that when keying an image, you need to make sure you connect the Gmask underneath the image if the image is going to be moved. Otherwise, the keyer itself will not. So if you want to keep the key of the image, you're keying with in the same plane as the image. You need to make sure it's parented underneath. In this case, it's not moving, so I don't need to do it. But I can show you an example of the problem you can have. Can lead to some interesting result, but if it's not what you want, you just need to connect it underneath, and now it's good.
Right.
Here's another take on it. It's just it's a different use case. If let's say it's impossible to do the Gmask link to a light for whatever reason, you can do it still the same thing. But so I've done the same kind of it's a different key, but it's the same ID. But then I put it on the 3D shape. So just to show you that you can still use the functionality of the Gmask on the 3D shape, where the spline and gradient are applied to the 3D shape, and then you can do a lighting link to it, and you'll see that my Lightbox is actually only affecting that piece of geometry. And it will lead to, I mean, it can fit better and other type of workflow than the Gmask link to the light. So it's just another way of using the same tracer technology. One other use case you can do of offset axis is to, when using 3D shape, is to put back in a perspective piece of geometry that are drawn on flat images. So I'll show you an example here with my building where the building is not in the same plane as that face of the building is not in the same plane as the image. So I'll draw my Gmask on the side here and show you what you can do with it. So first thing I want to do on the 3D shape is enable the media projection. So I'm projecting on the geometry the same image. And then if I play with the light, you'll see that, I mean, the light is not reacting at all to it because it's still all flat.
It's not reacting any differently than the image plane.
Exactly, yeah. So if I enable offset axis and then go on the axis on top of the 3D shape, that's very important. So you're not restricted to using the axis on right next above the Gmask to do that. And then switch to F4, you'll see that by rotating the axis in Y, I'm able to actually put the geometry in the same plane as as the building is in the image. So now if I'll make sure to switch it back off, and then if I move the light, then you'll see that it's actually going to react to it.
So that 3D shape is actually rotated in 3D space, if we go back to the view, but transparently to the user, you've actually modified the shape of the geometry and modified the position of the vertices to make it maintain, by our appearance, the same shape to our eye.
Exactly.
Well, that's really interesting, but something that came up on Facebook is physically based rendering, right? Or physically plausible even would be great. And you actually have something that's new in this release that I would say is both a glimpse into future technology maybe, as well as maybe a bit of a hack in the software. So why don't you go ahead and walk us through that?
Yeah. Yeah, so the new node that's part of the Lightbox library is called GGX Material. So this is a kind of using Lightbox as its full potential, let's say,
And exposing things under the hood.
Exactly, because the thing is with Lightbox, we make it easy to use if you just want to edit, color, the color information of the scene through the light framework. We also added more feature like in the API to allow you to control as much as possible the vertex position, camera position, but actually we put so much information that you can actually redo the rendering of the scene using a Matchbox, and this is what is happening here. So if I look at if we look at the result right now, this is what you'll have today using substance and an IBL on a piece of geometry, and here's what the GGX material allow you to do. So it's actually right now using the some parameter of the material node to control the algorithm or
under the hood.
Under the hood.
So it's kind of what I think of it, like thinking of it is, it's kind of similar to using expressions in a way.
Exactly.
You're actually throwing in an axis that says axis, it doesn't say anything, but you're controlling something else. Yeah. So for this release of this is what you're doing. You're kind of hijacking these controls.
Yeah, because we didn't have any control called metallic, roughness, and specular in the UI. So the three control you need to keep in mind is specular red, specular G, and the shine. So the shine is the roughness. So as you increase it, you'll see that the object becomes more rough, and the reflection of the IBL is becoming more diffuse. And the good thing also to keep in mind is in PBR, the settings of the IBL don't matter anymore, because it's the material that will dictate, how rough it is, how diffuse it is, how reflective it is. And this is what's good about the model, is that you could parent the same IBL to a different model, and the same IBL will react differently, depending on the settings of those parameters. So if I put back the roughness to 0 and have a kind of a chrome ball look, I can then change the metallic aspect by reducing the specular G channel. So as I move it down, I'll get to more plastic kind of object. The specular also should not be at 100. It's pretty high. Usually it's around like 20 or 0.2 depending on the scale, but in this case it's 100. It's around 20. Also the specular have no impact if an object is completely metallic. So if you change it and you wonder why it doesn't do anything, it's normal in the model. As you reduce the metallic aspect of a model, then the specular will have some impact on the hoop. And then be careful not put negative value. Doesn't exist in this. So that's pretty much it. The thing to be careful about is make sure that if you use substance or any other texture on a model, you import that the specular is hidden or removed. Right. Because as you see, we using those two channels for metallic and specular, and if a map is present, then it will override those, and then those will have no effects actually. So.
Oh, that's cool. I think it's an interesting, like I say, glimpse in the future, current hack, but actually could be some fun for people to play with.
Exactly.
Well, thanks so much for taking time to show us all these features. Appreciate it.